And now what you do? Roma. Mishka? Or Babylonia? Roma. Decide.
Welcome to Behind the Classics. Today we are diving into a work although early in its composer's career already heralds the revolution it would bring to the 20th century music. I'm talking about Verklarte Nacht, written by the young Arnold Schoenberg in 1899. Now, before you think that everything that Schoenberg composes is complex and atonal, let me tell you that Verklarte Nacht is pure emotion, a piece that envelopes us into the darkness and the light of the night. But what inspired Schoenberg to compose this piece? The answer takes us to poetry. The work is based on a poem by writer Richard Demel, also called Verklarte Nacht, Transfigured Night. And like so many good stories, this one begins with a painful confession during a moonlight walk at the night. The poem narrates the dialogue between a woman and a man deeply in love. A woman, a man deeply in love. But there is a secret. She confesses to him that she carries another man's child. Imagine that scene. She, consumed by guilt, feels weak and vulnerable. But he, after listening to her, decides that the love that he feels is stronger than any mistake in the past. He tells her that the child will be as much his own as if he had fathered it himself. And in that moment, the night is transfigured, the darkness illuminates. It's a story of redemption and transformation through love. And that's exactly what Schoenberg conveys with his music. Now, if you are thinking that this sounds quite romantic, you're right. Indeed, Schoenberg, he was at that moment madly in love. From what we know, he was just beginning his relationship with Mathilde Zemlinsky, his future wife, and that certainly influenced the emotional spirit of the work. Okay, now we are going to have a bare representation of this relation. Mathilde, Schoenberg. Hey, Mathilde, who you are speaking now? She loves to flirt. In fact, although Transfigured Night, Verklarte Nacht, wasn't formally a gift for Mathilde, his blossoming relationship with her was key to the emotional intensity of the piece. In a way, the work reflects the love he felt for Mathilde during those early years, while the immediate inspiration was Richard Demel's poem. The emotions Schoenberg poured into the music are deeply tied to his love for Mathilde. Mishka, Roma. The piece was originally written for a string sextet, but Schoenberg later adapted it for a full string orchestra. And although it is based on traditional tonality, something that purists of his time appreciate, it already contains the first hints of the break Schoenberg would later make with the tonal system. Listen to how the music moves. It begins in D minor, a dark and heavy key, to reflect the initial anguish of the confession. But gradually, the chords open up, the tension dissipates, and by the end, the piece resolves in D major, bright and redemptive. It is as if the night itself has transformed from something gloomy and dense to something filled with hope. Perhaps one could say that Schoenberg did here something similar to what we do with a difficult conversation. It starts in the dark, but with a little patience and understanding, we end up by seeing the light at the end. Though, of course, if only we would be as good handling emotion as Schoenberg is with harmonies. However, now let's turn this story upside down. What Schoenberg would experience a few years later would be the antithesis of this work. Third! Also in his life, a third one. Babylonia, his relationship with Matilde would be marked by tragedy. Babylonia, she had an extramarital affair. This relationship was complicated and deeply painful for Schoenberg. And what it is even more intriguing is that while that was happening, Schoenberg was composing the second string quartet, one of the most important works of his career. Richard, Matilde, and Schoenberg met through the bohemian and artistic circles of Vienna. Richard, an expressionist painter who had already gained some renown, was drawn to the vibrant and intellectual and emotional life of Matilde, the sister of composer Alexander von Zemlinsky. Matilde, on her part, sought in Mocky an emotional and creative space, something the more conventional relationship with Schoenberg seemed not to offer her that time. Hey, meanwhile Schoenberg was immersed in composing his string quartet number 2, this work is not a simple chamber piece. It's an emotional statement. As Matilde and Mocky's relationship intensified and Schoenberg quartet reflects the inner tension he was experiencing. It is in many ways a work that challenges the formal and emotional convention of the traditional string quartet by incorporating a final movement with a soprano, something practically unheard at that time. To add another layer of complexity, string quartet number 2 also marks the beginning of Schoenberg's departure from tonality, something that was not only revolutionary in musical terms but also mirrored the emotional chaos in his personal life. The inclusion of the voice in the final movement, with verses by Stefan Georg, speaking of transcending the earthly world, becomes a cry of despair and longing for unity and understanding. Sadly, the outcome of this story grows even darker. Mocky, after a time of tension and conflict, commit suicide. The pain of the situation, the infidelity, and the emotional void led Mocky to his tragic decision. the complexity of human relationships, love, and art intertwined in a whirlwind that affect not only Schoenberg and Mathilde, but resonate in the music they were creating. This episode in Schoenberg's life contrasts deeply with the message of Verklarte Nacht, where the light of love can transform even the darkest secrets. In his reality, however, he encountered the darkness of betrayal and despair. The tragedy of Richard left Schoenberg and Mathilde in a state of emotional anguish that affected their lives and art. In his letters and writings, Schoenberg reflected on pain and loss, which eventually led him to explore new musical forms as a way of dealing with emotions. His later music, marked by anguish and the search of new truth, can be seen as an answer to the complexity of this personal life. Despite the difficulties he faced, Schoenberg continued to develop his style, challenging established norms and creating a new form of expression that would eventually revolutionize 20th century music. But now, coming to Verklarte Nacht, Transfigure Night, and the young Schoenberg, the piece, which at the time was seen as a song of redemption, becomes in retrospect a reflection on the fragility of human relationships and the pain that can arise even from the deepest loves. And while Verklarte Nacht encapsulates a hope for transformation, Schoenberg's lives remind us that the path of love can be uncertain and painful. The reaction at the time with critics and public was, as often happens with innovations, mixed. Some were amazed by the emotional intensity and harmonic richness of the piece. Others, the more conservative, couldn't accept what they saw as an excessive dissonance. Remember, this was the late 19th century, and the romantic music was at its height. Brahms, Wagner were the kings. Schoenberg was pushing boundaries even more, and that made many uncomfortable. But Verklarte Nacht has stood the test of time, and today it's considered one of the great chamber music works of that period. It doesn't just speak of love and redemption, but also give us a fascinating glimpse of a composer on the brink of artistic transformation. So next time you walk under the moonlight, think of Schoenberg and his Verklarte Nacht. Who knows, maybe you will find a little of that transformative light on your own path. Thank you for joining me today. I'm Juanito, and this has been Behind the Classics. Remember, behind every note, there is a life tale waiting for us. See you in the next episode. We will continue to explore the music that has left an indelible mark in the history. Big kiss, and remember to give your like, share, and subscribe. Ciao! So it seems that you know very well how to paint. Show me a bit. Hey, what do you want now again? Love, passion,